Good evening from, it's like a strange time here in California. It's lots of fires, and yet we're back in the garden, which is where we started. My name is Victoria Vesna, director of the ArtSci Center, and also professor in the Department of Design Media Arts, which is how I met Dama and Clinton Van Arman. They were students in my classes, and I kind of noticed that these two had some really interesting ideas. I was working with sounds from a microscope. Clinton was working with sound. I absolutely enamored with sound. So we started slowly working together, and now we're actually collaborating. We did two performances today together, and a number of performances, workshops, lectures, talks, dialogues, demonstrations. This program, the telluric vibrations, just kind of went wild. And at the end of this, we started with Victoria Sorg, the director of the garden, who was so generous to let us work there and actually have it as our base. We got kicked out of the garden, which also had a kind of a symbolic value. We're using the kind of virtual garden screens right now, but we did manage to spend some time there before the administration told us, no, you can't be here. And we recorded some workshops and we looked at ways to continue that relationship. And I think it will happen. So we're thinking about sound. We look at really how the idea of telluric came back to a full kind of fruition. The vibrations of the earth, the frequencies that we create, that the plants create, that we feel, and the sounds of the atmosphere, the waters, the fear, the frequencies of fear, and just really trying to tap into that. And one of the things that kept coming back is the idea of breathing. And of course, as I mentioned at the very beginning, it's a very strange time here. We can't go into closed places because of COVID, and we can't go out because of the air. So we're literally stuck. And in that sense, we're fortunate because we can breathe inside our places. It's not true for a lot of people who are suffering right now. And the performances that Ivana and Clinton did actually address that with the idea of breath and breathing in the garden. And at times it was really intense because that's how we're feeling. And at the same time, we're feeling that we have to keep going. And this workshop is about that. It's about creating solidarity through sound and being in the garden. So we totally connect with Ars Electronica, Kepler's garden idea in so many ways. And we're really grateful to Ars Electronica for including us, to all those who participated. And I'm super grateful to you too. Really, I think it's such a pleasure. You just have to promise me when you get super famous that you won't forget me. Anyway, welcome and introduce your garden. And, last but not least, thank you for being here.
Victoria, thank you for this. This is not an introduction. This feels like a journey that we've been together for the last couple of days for the program that was very ambitious. As a ArtSci team collective, we had over 60 events. They were scheduled in only a period of 4 days, and we were constantly going. And I feel really like as a part of like a little family that did something insane in a short amount of time. And I'm so surprised. I just keep thinking like, I don't know how this all happened. And I'm kind of happy that we were first thinking like, oh, we're the last performance, last workshop on a schedule. There's nothing after this. And in Europe, it's now another, like it's middle of night and like probably people won't watch this. And we were thinking like, maybe we should give up and not do this. And I'm so glad we did because it created this whole circle and everything totally is connected and makes sense. Going from the first lecture, as Victoria mentioned, to the last workshop that we're gonna do, it's all connected and it's all happening in a garden. And with this theme of the Ars Electronica this year with the Kepler's Garden, we're kind of getting into their space and sharing our own space, and it's just wonderful. And just thank you for this opportunity. Clinton is gonna say a little more about workshop, but we're really excited to share thoughts and everything with the audience, and we'll be available. I know this is a crazy time for the rest of the world. It just works for West Coast in Los Angeles, but we're gonna leave our information in the comments, and feel free to reach out to us and if you have any further questions. But
as Victoria was mentioning, we're really fortunate to be here right now, and really fortunate to have our little sanctuaries where we can do this work. I think it's a great workshop to end because it introduces mindfulness in sound. And so during these times, you might see us in a garden or outside that might not be accessible to all, but even inside, wherever you're at, wherever you feel safe, then there are listening practices that we're going to introduce in this workshop that I think can help everyone with some mental exercises and both the way you think about sound. So I hope everyone enjoys it.
It's really wonderful. And just to say one thing to what both of you are saying, I feel that what we were doing and what's happening with Ars Electronica with so many 120 locations and thousands of people, it's like it's bigger than us. It's as if it's this big energy, because in a way it doesn't make sense. And rationally, I don't even know how we did it. I mean, it was like this magnet and people, and everybody was coming together and participating fully. It was just like it has to happen. So it gives me hope. And I feel that we keep going because we should and we have to. We can't just stop and wait. And this time in between paradigms is so important. So to work with sound, I feel is just so critical, because it really is about raising the frequency of how people think, of how people feel, and connecting to natural systems. This is really the key. And to have the idea of the Kepler's Garden and us part of it is just wonderful. But it really was like this force to me that just we kept going, and somehow even when I felt tired, I would get energized by the amazing people who came together and talked and shared their ideas. And suddenly all of us who were so separated came together, like-minded community. That's a world community. So to keep that going is so great, and I really appreciate the work you're doing. So let's get to it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I'm going to start my presentation by sharing RYUICHI Sakamoto's short piece of his documentary. This is just to introduce you to this whole concept of sound recording and how it can be used for composing as well. He is a world famous composer, and many of you probably know some of his compositions, or you had a chance to hear his work in many famous movies. But he's using actually this simple technique a lot of times, and it's just incredible to see that someone who is on that world scale level is actually doing what we're going to do today.
考えているわけですけど、まあ普通はそういうもの音楽としては聞いてないんですけども、よく聞くととても面白いんですよ。音楽的にも面白いし。I'm fishing the sound.
It's very short.
考えているわけですけど、考えているわけですけど。
Very short video, but really inspiring for both me and Clinton. And I highly suggest watching his documentary called Coda. If you ever had a chance, and if you're interested in sound, it's so inspiring. It made us both work on our projects, and it was just really amazing. This is the second video that is gonna help us, because we're coming from different perspectives, and this is just a very basic video. I'm sure that Dr. Jim Jezewski is going to go more, and Adam too are going to talk more and introduce this in a very deep level. But this is just very basic to make sure that we're all on the same page.
Why does everything around us generate sound? Also, there are a whole variety of sounds. Running water, a cell phone, music, someone's voice.
Hello?
The list of sounds you hear throughout a given day is endless. But when you are shown what sound looks like, inevitably you are shown something like this, which sounds like this. And to me, that doesn't make much sense because you never hear that sound in the real world. In this branch episode, let's try to better understand what is sound. Let's start with a simple sound. That was popping an inflated polka dot balloon. This polka dot balloon is filled with high pressure air particles, and when popped, all these particles rush out and hit the adjacent air particles. Those particles hit the next set of adjacent air particles, and so on, thereby creating an expanding shell of air particles just bouncing into one another. This is called a pressure wave or sound wave. This wave travels throughout the room, and eventually the bouncing air particles apply a force to your eardrum, which causes parts of your internal ear to move. Then your brain processes this motion in your internal ear and tells your cognition that, oh, this motion in my ear sounds like a popping balloon. Let's
So that was a short introduction. And I'm gonna introduce one of my favorite artists and composers, and probably the most inspiring person that John actually introduced today by showing a video, short video. He is really defining some things and very early too. And I really want you to all be familiar with his name if you're not already. His name is John Cage. And I introduced a quote here where he said that there's no such a thing as an empty space or an empty time, that there's always something to see and something to hear. And if we think about that, it goes much deeper than just a simple quote, and it applies to our daily lives and all the activities that we do all the time. And I'm going to deeply go into that in the next couple of slides. But to understand this, the sound, we must first understand the silence. And in this workshop, we're going to challenge these conventional ways of thinking about sound and music by paying a close attention to everything we hear. And if we agree that sound is opposite of silence, and we consider that absolute silence is almost unreachable, knowing even that in silent rooms we can hear our breathing or our heart beating or our blood streaming. So it's very hard to talk about silence because we probably never had a chance to experience it. And here is John Cage's video quickly explaining his experience.
It was after I got to Boston that I went into the anechoic chamber at Harvard University. Anybody who knows me knows this story. I am constantly telling it. Anyway, in that silent room, I heard two sounds, one high and one low. Afterward, I asked the engineer in charge why, if the room was so silent, I had heard two sounds. He said, "Describe them." I did. He said the high one was your nervous system in operation. The low one was your blood in circulation.
So going off of that slide, and just to quickly explain what is an anechoic chamber, it's a room, the silent room also called, the different name. It's designed to completely absorb the reflections. And it's using these pyramid absorbers to completely isolate the sounds that are either coming from outside of the room or inside of the room too. But then here is an image of John Cage being in one of these rooms, and he's saying that he still doesn't feel like it's completely silent because he hears his breathing or blood streaming. And it's very interesting to think in that way. And then we have to introduce, talking about sound, like time is really important, But then looking at the perspective that time is one of the greatest examples of something that is socially constructed. And today we are probably in 8 different time zones. And I'm sure that later today, Asia is going to have a chance to watch this lecture. But knowing that time zones are actually created in the 19th century in the United States during the Gilded Age, when they were constructing the railroad and they had to connect east and west, and how can we tell people on what time to catch the train when time is different in their place, when the sun is setting in a different time in my place. So they constructed time zones that they're helping us figure out how we function. But it's something that is it doesn't mean if it's socially constructed, it doesn't mean that it completely doesn't exist or there is an illusion. It's just something that human created, like the human created a meaning around and the concept of time. So I just want you to be aware of that before we move on. And as Professor Victoria Vazna explained in her lecture, noise pollution is really important part to think about the sound. And if we all pause for a second and just listen to sounds around us, we can probably hear a lot of things. In this moment, I can hear my fridge in the background. I can also hear the birds in front of my house and trees. And I'm lucky that I don't hear any street noise, maybe not in this house, but in my old apartment, I was constantly, oh, here's one car in the distance. So I can still hear that. But if you pay close attention, there's constantly sounds around us. And what is really important is that these sounds can be harmful for us, and we are not aware of that. They're killing many planktons, as Dr. Victoria was explaining. And an important thing is that there's many research showing that people who live close to the airports or very loud places have actually bad health results as a result of that. So it's still it's still a fairly new thing, and people don't consider it seriously. But one thing that I found in this New York, I provided a link in my lecture. We won't have time to watch it. It's 8 minutes long, but I highly encourage everyone to watch this video. It's comparing the noise pollution of the traffic and everything that we're hearing today to almost like a garbage that if we see around the streets. And what we're going to do today is collect this garbage and do something creative and repurpose it and use it in more creative ways, and realize how we can repurpose this. But just something to be aware of when we're talking about ecology. There's few artists I'm going to introduce today, and I really hope that you guys get familiar with some of their names. Bill Fontana is very important and in a lot of ways, but his work, he's also artist who's inspired by John Cage. And I like his a piece called Bridge Harmonies. And he's doing these massive sound recordings. They're very, like he did one recently in CERN, which is a nuclear lab in Zurich. And he's just out there currently working and having a lot of internationally recognized project. But what is interesting is that he was at UCLA and he was invited by the, Dr. Victoria Vazna to participate in Sound and Science Symposium last year. So I had a chance to meet him, and I won't have time to go more into his projects, but he's really inspiring person, and I highly encourage you to look at his work too. Here's one of the artists that I saw his work couple of years ago, and it really shifted the way I was thinking about data and collecting data. So what we're doing today is essentially collecting information from either outside of our houses or in our homes too, but we're collecting. And so thinking in that way, RYUICHI IKEDA did a piece called Test Pattern there was, maybe Clinton can say a little more.
Sure, yeah, I can
before
pick it
I play
up from here. So I am really inspired by his work. He kind of got his notoriety from using data from climate change to trigger different custom software, and then the software would react to the data. So here's an example of that and how he would use this as an installation. And then the projections are barcodes, so just to represent more of the data. Okay, so yeah, that's I think a good example of, is there a link? Okay. So that's a good example of an artist that's using data to kind of tie the, connect the dots of data-driven art, music, composition. So he's inspiring to both musicians and to artists. And I think Laurie Spiegel is also. So her project called The Expanding Universe, she is actually she worked with a company called Bell Labs, and in the 1960s and 70s. And she created this composition based off of Kepler's theory of harmony. And so she used these data of rotations of planets and triggered different synthesizers. So as the synthesizers were going in and out of each other, then those were the rotations of the planets. And as I think everyone learned yesterday about the golden record, is that right? Carl Sagan? No, okay. So Carl Sagan was a scientist, astronomer, and he made a golden record that was sent to space in case aliens or extraterrestrial life came in contact with this record. Then it would show different cultural events from Earth, and this was part of that record.
This song was one of
this song was one of the songs on the record. So next, let's take a look at IVANA'S artwork. So this is a project that we did called Turbulence. Turbulence was based off of another data-driven project based off of Hurricane Harvey, a hurricane that happened in Houston, Texas. And you know, the reason we chose this hurricane was because there was so much data on it. So each parameter of the hurricane, such as wind speed, wind direction, rainfall, location, triggered different parts of synthesizers, drum machines, and made up a composition. So the composition was triggered by hurricane data. Take a look at this.
So there was like a minute preview project that was hour long, and it was performed at the Broad Stage in Santa Monica. And one interesting thing that happened during the performance was that, you know, a lot of time the audience would have to leave the room because it was too noisy, as if the rainfall and wind speed would be high at the same time, it would create this noise. So it's really interesting how data can be used in all different sorts of ways. But there's a little summary that we are making right now, and we're also open to talk to you. And if you have any questions, please speak up. It's hard for me to see the chat in this moment. So if you want to comment or add something, we're not done yet, but we still have a few more things to go over.
Yeah, so just to go over what we learned so far, but the main thing that we want to take away before we dive into our step-by-step is, as we listen to sound, as that science video that we learned talked about, is the sound of a balloon popping or traffic only sounds like that because of our memory, not because of the sound alone. So in this workshop, what we're trying to do is separate that memory from the tonal frequencies of the sound. And the sound of traffic was actually John Cage, the musician, one of his favorite sounds, because he likes the construction of that sound. So that's what we're trying to do, is figure out how to listen to sound more off the construction and break that from our memory. And in doing that, it actually introduces some mindfulness, because you become more aware of your surroundings. So the materials we're going to need are super simple: a smartphone and or any other recording device, headphones, and if you would like to, we can. The optional materials are headphones, and then the microphone, if you have one, not necessary. So here is an example of an audio recording that I did for one of my projects that we can get a kind of look at. So this is a good example. And then that sound you can see up here in the top left corner was actually used to compose for a project I did that I ended up recording over 100 different sound recordings with video, and then I plugged them into a drum machine and created these drum patterns based off of these sound recordings. So let's watch a little preview of that. So it's a 4-minute video, and it can go longer. It's all generative, but yeah, it's an example of how we can use nature as noise rather than this. We can use all different sounds as noise. So, and then Ivana can talk about her work.
So I did just going off of what Clinton was saying, how like a lot of projects and a lot of work in general that I do is related to electronics and sound, and combining those two things, and also being interested in visual aspect as well. I will show quickly one of the projects that I did during the biotech class that I took with Professor Victoria Vesna, and I had a chance to show this project multiple times, and the last time I showed it at Royce Hall before as an opening show for Max Richter. And it's essentially a device, actually simple microscope that is using the image reading software to trigger different sounds. And I'm going to play a 1-minute video too. give you an idea. So I forgot to mention that as the slides that you're able to see, I collaborated with a neuroscientist from UCLA, Marcos Ortega, and he actually helped me get a human brain tissues, and I was analyzing them. So this was just an example of how art and science can be combining, how we can use some fairly known as scientific tools and repurpose them. So yeah, I'm going to go back to the resources page. For anyone who is interested, there are a couple of books that were really inspiring to us on making this workshop. I really like this whole, they have a whole collection of different topics, and particularly I was interested in systems and sound. But there's also, I would encourage you to just look at this, and MIT Press is publishing them. Also, Philosophy of Audio, Figures in Air, and Deep Listening by Paulina Oliveros. If any of you are interested, I encourage you to go and look at this more. As Quentin was mentioning, assignment is optional only if you choose it. And there's 2 softwares that we'll be using, both are free. And if anyone is interested to dive deep and use this, the reason why I'm saying this is like, I'm not trying to force anyone to do our workshop over the others, but it's very useful as a tool for both scientists and artists. A lot of times I'm coming from a visual art perspective, and a lot of times I needed to make a composition. So I would ask my friends who are composers, including Clinton, hey, can you do this quick sound for me? Because you can't upload any sound that is not created either by you. You don't have copyrights to use anyone else's sound for your work. So really, this is a very effective and easy way to create all different kinds of background sounds that scientists can use in their presentation too, or it can be used in a lot of different ways.
So let's go with the exercise, and then I will talk a little bit more after that. Hello everyone, my name is Clinton, and we are recording from the UCLA Botanical Gardens. All right everyone, so we're going to start off by just talking about some of the materials we're using in this workshop. First, we have my cell phone here. We also have a little external microphone that I will be using to get a little more clear and dynamic sound. And then we have some wireless headphones so I could monitor and listen to the sound as I'm recording them. Okay, so for this workshop, I'm going to record 4 sounds here at the Botanical Gardens. The first is something I find really interesting. It's the sound of the breeze flowing through the leaves of a tulip wood tree here at the Botanical Gardens. I love this sound. I think it's not only relaxing, but I also think it amplifies the sound of the tree and the sound of the wind. So, okay, so first recording's done. I got the sound of the wind, I got everything that I needed from that recording, but something else happened to me in the middle of the recording. I got ambient noise from different construction site up the street and also the small road that's next to us. What's interesting about that is you go in for one sound, but other things happen, and through that process of deep listening, we have discovered other ambient noise that will be used in our composition. Okay, my second sound is going to be the sound of this creek. I love the sound of flowing water. I think it's relaxing, but I also love the sound, the constant noise that it's bringing. I think it's going to be a great element to our composition, especially that layered kind of in and out percussive sound of traffic mixed with the wind that we had earlier. Layered with this noise is going to add something I think really interesting. So let's go ahead and record this. All right, so for sound number 3, as I was walking around searching for sounds, I kept hearing the sound of my own footsteps, and I thought, what an interesting sound this is going to be. We have 2 beautiful ambient sounds right now for our composition. I think it could be interesting to add something percussive. So that's what I'm about to do. All right, so for our last track in the composition, I always love the sound of dried leaves. There's something about it that reminds me of fall time, the changing of the seasons, but also just that kind of strict, higher pitched grind next to each other has something really interesting that I have always found fascinating. So I'm gonna do that. I'm gonna put these leaves next to my 2 fingers, rub them back and forth, and capture this sound. All right, that sounded great. I'm excited. We're done.
Okay, so I hope you had a chance to practice and try our workshop. And if you would like, you can pause the video at this point and really focus on going outside and collecting the sounds and trying to do this workshop on your own. We'll use this chance just to share the screen and quickly show you what we did previously with another group. And it's really fascinating what you can get with simply recording with your smartphone. So I just encourage you to look at this, and Clinton, you can share the screen. And,
sure, yeah. So this is just a simple combination of, one sec, of audio combination. So there's 2 different ways really to approach this, and one would be manipulation of audio after you recorded it, or you can just combine audio, and the combination creates this kind of wall of noise. So I'll share that over the summer program we did, where we combined, it was 32 different students' work, and it created something kind of abstract and unique. Hopefully everyone can hear this. So, cool. So if we kind of go into each individual one real quick, we don't have to go through all of them, but just so we can see the makeup of these tracks. So we have there, and then something like water. So as you can tell, a lot of them are based off of something like water, but each type of water that you're going to record is going to have different range on the frequency spectrum and different tonalities. So it's interesting that maybe an exercise would be to record the same thing multiple times and get different tones off of that. So yeah.
And this really took a couple of seconds to put everything together. But if you spend more time and actually think about arranging the arrangements and composing and adding parts, you can just get incredible results in a very short amount of time.
Yeah.
And it does feel in a way like cheating, but it's also very fascinating and amazing thing that all of us can do to help improve our projects. I hope you're going to find it useful. And thank you for being here and watching this.
Thank you for being here, and I hope everyone enjoyed.
Thank you for that great workshop. I know the students at the Summer Institute were so thrilled, and you actually helped them think of sound and frequencies and their environment in a different way. And this to me is so critical at this time when we're seemingly isolated. So in a way, you realize that you're not. Everything around you is moving. And having this at the end to me actually makes perfect sense. The idea of telluric, the word itself actually was introduced to us by Shane, who is a geologist in our ArtSci group. And I have to admit, I didn't even know exactly what it meant, but it became something really dear to us to actually even call ourselves Tellurians, meaning of the earth. And telluric means that you're being or relating to something that's usually there, a kind of a natural electric current that's flowing near the Earth's surface. So it makes you think of yourself, but it makes you think of your relationship to the Earth's surface. And that to me is so beautiful to think about the Earth, the surface, natural systems, ourself, and how we can collectively do these compositions. I really see it as being something that will inspire people, and we should continue working this way and keep raising the vibrations. And thank you so much. And everybody out there will come in the future and look at your workshop, and we'll keep working on this. So
thank you, Victoria, an incredible job, and thank you for doing this crazy thing.
We have to give you the Tellurian medal.
Also, real quick, we're going to post in the comments the performance that Ivana and I did for the botanical gardens, and we kind of used a similar technique as the workshop to create this composition, so maybe someone can find it interesting.
All right. Okay, well, thank you, everybody. Hands disappearing in the garden.
Oh, yeah. Mozilla Hub. You want to mention that?
Yeah, so we have actually created a virtual gardens gallery space where we collected all the projects, all the artwork that we did throughout these crazy 4 days. And I know that a lot of people want to see this. And I just highly encourage everyone to go to telluricvibration.com, and there's everything explained how to get into this virtual space and see all in one space. So yeah, thank you so much. And
thank you. Okay, bye. Hands again. Bye.
This virtual background.
Yeah.